Welcome to another episode of the Settlage Strength Podcast. I'm excited to be chatting and hanging out with you today. If you're part of the Lift Heavy, Roll Hard Grappling Club, you're my boy. So I'll just be completely honest with you. I've already recorded this podcast once before, and it was on a different topic, but the audio got messed up, and so I'm re-recording it, and kind of in the process of re-recording, I was like, you know what? Let's just turn this week's episode into a training chat. We're just going to chat about training. You can listen to this while you're on your way to the gym. You can listen to this on your way to Jiu Jitsu. You can listen to it during your workout, or maybe you're at work doing your regular job, whatever. But you and me, we're just hanging out, chatting about training. So I got a couple topics that we're going to go over today that some of the other members of the Lift Heavy, Roll Hard Grappling Club have sent in. But the biggest thing I wanted to start with was just kind of where I'm at in my own training and some of the changes I'm making to further help me develop elite grappling athleticism, further help me become brutally strong, pack on slabs of muscle, and never gas out. So just to give some context, we are currently in the month of May, and I just finished, like 2 weeks ago, I just finished up a 6-month-long bulk. And during this bulking phase, I really wanted to push towards the goal of trying to get as big and as strong as possible for Jiu Jitsu. I've done other bulks in the past where I was really focusing on powerlifting, really focusing on bodybuilding. So like all I cared about were numbers on my squat, bench, deadlift, and overhead press. All I cared about was like how big my arms are, you know, if I have that perfect like X frame and all that stuff. And so with this most recent bulk, I was doing a lot of different things to try to push up strength and hypertrophy, all within the context of grappling athleticism. And it went great. I am going to turn basically the training programs that I followed during that 6 months, I'm going to turn those into official training programs on the Strength Matrix training app. So be on the lookout for that, because those are going to be coming soon here, hopefully within the next couple of months. But the way I structured that was, okay, this is going to be 6 months long, and the first 3 months are going to be focused on hypertrophy. The next 3 months are going to be focused on strength. Now, even though the first 3 months are focused on hypertrophy, that doesn't mean that we're not doing our explosive work. That doesn't mean we're not doing conditioning. That doesn't mean that we're not maintaining other aspects of our athleticism. We're just emphasizing hypertrophy a lot more than some of those other qualities of athleticism. Then when we move into strength, that's not to say that we're not doing any more hypertrophy. We still are. We're just really turning up and emphasizing strength over the other athletic qualities. So a typical week of training in that hypertrophy phase would have looked like, let's see, when I was doing the hypertrophy phase, I was in the gym 4 to 5 days a week. Day one was pretty much always a max effort, lower dynamic effort, upper workout. So very classic condensed conjugate, which I have talked about before in some other podcast episodes and some other videos on my YouTube channel. But that max effort, lower dynamic effort, upper workout for hypertrophy often looked like picking some form of squat or hamstring dominant, or like a quad dominant squat or a hamstring dominant deadlift as my max effort main movement. And I just worked up to a heavy set of 6 reps or a heavy set of 8 reps. Didn't do lower reps than that, because I did want to kind of stay within those more traditional hypertrophy rep ranges while also still getting some benefit of strength. So like a squat, for example, could be like a heel elevated belt squat, or a high bar back squat, or you could use a hack squat if you wanted to. I didn't end up doing the hack squat, but it was like very quad dominant for the squatting movements, and then very hamstring dominant for the hip hinging or deadlift movements. So I did do a deficit stiff leg deadlift for a few phases of training, and that felt really good. But I'd basically do like a max effort main movement, working up to a 6 to 8 rep max. Then I would do some secondary movements. And if you remember from the videos I've done on the max effort method, when we pick secondary exercises, the way I like to look at it is that we have 3 options. Our secondary exercises can either be variations of the movement we just did that kind of focus on one aspect of that movement. So if bench press is your max effort main movement, close grip bench press could be your secondary movement. It's the exact same movement pattern. You're just doing a different variation. You can either look at the movement pattern that you did in your main movement and then do something that you didn't do in the main movement to have a little bit more well-rounded and balanced approach. So for example, if you squatted on 2 legs for your max effort main movement, your secondary movement could include some form of unilateral squatting or lunging. And during the hypertrophy and the strength phase, that's oftentimes what I did. And then the third way that you could pick secondary exercises is to pick them after you've done your max effort main movement and tie it directly to a weakness that you found in the main movement. So for example, say you did a bench press for your max effort main movement and you failed at lockout, or your lockout was really, really weak. Okay, well now you know you have weak triceps, so then your max effort secondary movement would be something that's specific to the weakness of building up your triceps, or specific to addressing that weak point. So in the hypertrophy phase, it was often like a main movement. Then the secondary movement was tackling something that I didn't directly hit in the main movement. Usually for both upper and lower body, I did 1 max effort main movement, 2 secondary movements. Then after that, we moved into our dynamic effort work, and on day 1, we do max effort lower, dynamic effort upper. I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds on what we did with dynamic effort upper because we did a lot of new things that I haven't really talked about before. So I'll save those for when we make more videos about this specific training program. But it was all super fast, super twitchy, super explosive. That was day 1. On day 2 for the week, I still did about 40 to 60 minutes of zone 2 cardio, and I would just go out for a run. And that was great because this was the first time that I was really maintaining my running ability through a bulk. And all the other bulks I've done in the past, I would do a little bit of conditioning, but it wasn't zone 2 focused. It was very explosive, very fast, very anaerobic, so to speak. And so in this training program, I wanted to make sure okay, I don't want to lose my conditioning. I know I'm not going to be making a whole lot of gains on my conditioning, but at the very least, I just want to maintain. And as I'm getting bigger, I want to kind of continue to maintain my conditioning so that way I don't really feel a lot of the negative effects of being bigger and how that could impact my conditioning. So day 1, max effort lower, dynamic effort upper. Day 2 was my zone 2 day. Day 3 was max effort upper, dynamic effort lower. And for the upper body movements, I'd either do some form of a max effort bench press variation or some form of a vertical press or overhead press variation. And then I would do my secondary movements and stuff like that. And then we'd close out that workout with our dynamic effort lower body exercises. Day 4 is really interesting because day 4, I played around with a couple different things. During the hypertrophy, the 3 months where I was really focused on hypertrophy, I took day 4 as another day to kind of get in some more accessory work. So I hit those smaller muscle groups that are still being worked with all of your main movements and a lot of your big compound lifts, but they're small enough to where they can recover really, really fast. So definitely worked a lot on my shoulders, worked a lot on my forearms. I did a lot of calf exercises too. It'd be cool if my calves grew a lot more, but that wasn't really the main focus. I just wanted my calves just to get really strong, and especially all the tissue around my Achilles tendon and in my feet and all that stuff. So I did a lot of calf work on day 4. Day 5 was a much more traditional, just straight up upper body jacked and tan session. So it was basically an upper body bodybuilding workout. We got a crazy chest pump, crazy shoulder pump, crazy back pump, crazy arm pump, and we called it a day. Most of the time, I could get my training kind of all done within that 5-day training split, but sometimes, depending on my work schedule and other stuff that was going on, I had to kind of roll over some exercises onto Saturday. So if I didn't get some accessory exercises done from Wednesday or Friday, I would just put all those together on Saturday. Saturday was kind of like my catch up or my makeup day. And so I did all those training sessions in the morning. And then what jiu-jitsu looked like during that time was I was really only training about 2 times, maybe 3 times a week. The thing is, I went into this bulk being very intentional and very clear about what my goals were and what my focus was. My goal and my focus was to get as big and as jacked and as strong as possible for jiu-jitsu. And so I wasn't going to try to chase that goal and at the same time try to chase going to jiu-jitsu 7 days a week. Like that would have been, it's not impossible, but it just wasn't going to be realistic for me to maintain for 6 full months. So I went into this bulk knowing like, okay, I want to be at jiu-jitsu a minimum of 2 times a week. And if I can get in an extra session and go 3 times a week, that's fantastic. And I'd say like I went twice a week most weeks throughout the last 6 months, but there are definitely some times where like I missed a week or even like or towards the end of the bulk, I missed like 2 weeks in a row. So, but I was okay with that. Like jiu-jitsu wasn't the main focus. It wasn't the main goal. And I knew that jiu-jitsu was going to kind of be on the back burner a little bit. And so on the days that I did go to jiu-jitsu, the way I structured it was I just went in with a goal for that day. And I kind of just like did the best I can to maintain my intention for that training session. So there were some days like, say I went on like day 1 was max effort, lower, dynamic effort, upper. So I already know like, okay, if I go to jiu-jitsu on day 2 or the night of day 2, my lower body is going to be kind of sore. So I'm just going to take day 2 a little bit lighter at jiu-jitsu because I also know that the following morning on day 3, when I go to the gym, I need to push it really hard for my upper body. So that first jiu-jitsu session was definitely a little bit lighter. Then the kind of like the last jiu-jitsu session towards the end of the week, that was the day that I really tried to push it, try to pick like a lot tougher training partners, do a lot more just full-blown sparring rounds, and kind of go from there. So that's kind of how I structured the bulk. You know, I ran 3 months of that format, kind of leaning more on the side of hypertrophy. Then after closing out those 12 weeks of hypertrophy, kind of moved into focusing a little bit more on strength. And maybe I'll do an episode in the future just kind of breaking down like, okay, when do you want to train specifically for hypertrophy? When do you want to train specifically for strength? And we can definitely get into the weeds on all those details, but I'll leave you guys with this. The thing that I think is very important to understand about strength and hypertrophy is that I have found so much success with doing a ton of hypertrophy work before you go into your main strength phase. That doesn't mean that you can't work on strength while also working on hypertrophy, and you can't work on hypertrophy while also working on strength. But if you think of it like dials, if you're pushing your hypertrophy dial all the way up, you want to do that for 12 to 24 weeks before you switch to then pushing up your strength dial. And the main reason being is because a bigger muscle has a greater potential to increase strength or to be trained in a way that's going to make it stronger. So if you kind of like supercharge your strength program, if you have a 12-week strength program and you say, okay, I want to do the 12-week strength program I want to start in April. Okay, well, January, February, and March, that would be the perfect time for you to really push up that hypertrophy dial, increase muscle size a little bit going into that strength phase. So you kind of have bigger muscles that you can train to get stronger and improve their force production capacity. And that's basically what I did. 3 months of hypertrophy followed by 3 months of strength work. I started this bulk weighing 158 pounds, which was pretty much the leanest I'd ever gotten. I'd go as far to say like I got leaner than I was when I did the bodybuilding show. And when I did the bodybuilding show, I weighed 149.6. I think it was 149.6. So over those last several years, gaining about 9 pounds of lean mass. I didn't get a DEXA scan or anything, so I can't say it was all muscle tissue, but that feels pretty good, and that gets me pretty excited. So the goal with this bulk was, okay, by the next time I lean out, I want to get that shredded again over 160. So hopefully within like 163 to 165. Being 165 and that lean, I think would be absolutely ridiculous. I don't believe I could have realistically added 7 pounds of muscle in 6 months, but maybe it's a combination of things where my muscles are just a little bit bigger, so I look bigger and I have water in all the right places to weigh 165 and still look that shredded. But regardless, I just wanted to do the best I could over the last 6 months to get jacked and get really, really strong for jiu-jitsu. And I've had great feedback from all of my training partners that have said, like, man, you feel way stronger. And for me personally, I feel way stronger. My conditioning feels great. And so all in all, it was a great bulk. And that kind of leads us to this week. The day I'm recording this is May 10th. So this is the end of that first week of the new training program that I started, which what I'm working on right now is a triphasic training program. Some of you may be familiar with Cal Dietz. He is the Olympic strength coach at the University of Minnesota. He wrote the book Triphasic Training, and I love triphasic training, especially when you're like kind of coming out of what would be more recognized as off-season training, so a lot of strength, a lot of hypertrophy work. When you're moving into your preseason, or you're moving into like, hey, I'm not going to dive into competition just yet, but I'm kind of ramping up to get to that point where I do want to dive into some jiu-jitsu competitions. If that's where you're at, triphasic training is fantastic. And what triphasic training is, in the simplest terms possible, is really training the different types of muscle contractions. So when you like move a muscle or move your arm or your legs or whatever, your muscles go through 3 different phases. And that's why it's called triphasic. The first phase is like the eccentric, or lengthening the muscle under load. You think of dropping down into a squat position. As you lower yourself into the bottom position, a lot of those muscles in your lower body are being stretched under load. The next phase, or phase 2, is the isometric. The isometric can sometimes be only a fraction of a second. Sometimes you can be very deliberate and hold that isometric contraction for 3 to 5 seconds. Really what isometric contractions are you're just holding a certain joint angle against resistance, or you're just holding still. Pretty much, you're not moving. That the movement is isolated, aka isometric. And so when you lower yourself down into the bottom of a squat, even if you don't pause for 5 seconds, you're still stopping that lowering movement before you start standing up. And that's the isometric. So eccentric, lengthening the muscle under load. Isometric, holding a static position against resistance or stopping movement. And then concentric is going to be the shortening of the muscle, or like contracting the muscle. If you're doing a bicep curl, that would be curling up. If you're doing a pull-up, that would be pulling up to the bar. If you're doing a squat, that'd be when you stand up out of the squat position. And when you go through triphasic training, what you're doing is you're focusing on each of those muscle contractions for a couple weeks. So you may spend 2 to 3 weeks really emphasizing the eccentric portion of these different movements. So, tempos on the way down for a squat, or doing different types of eccentric overloading, where you can use things like weight releasers. You can use things like, if you have training partners, I've done this before, you got to make sure you have good training partners and people who are smart and not going to let you injure yourself or anything like that, but you can almost like super load more than your max for a given exercise and just try to fight the weight on the way down. So we've done this before where when I was running training sessions, more training sessions in person with a group of jiu-jitsu athletes, if someone's max bench press, say their max bench press was like, say it was like 235 or something like that. What we would do is we would put 245 or 250 on the bar, and we'd tell them like, okay, we just want you to fight the weight on the way down. When it gets to the bottom on your chest, we're going to pick the weight up off your chest. Or sometimes we would put pins in the rack or pins on the bench, so that way they just lower it down with control to the pins. So you run that for a couple weeks, really focusing on improving your eccentric strength. Then after that, you'd move into focusing on the isometric phase. So you do lots of different yielding isometrics. That's where like you're pausing at the bottom of a squat, pausing on bench press, pausing and holding your chin over the bar on chin-ups. After you do a phase of developing your isometric strength, then you go into your reactive phase, which is kind of where you tie it all together. So you want to, be as fast and as twitchy and as explosive as possible. You want to improve your ability to absorb force, stop that force quickly and under control, and then explode out of those bottom positions. And that's a very oversimplified explanation of what triphasic training is. That's kind of what I'm moving into now, and it's been really, really fun. So for this week, with the first week, what we did for my training sessions were I did some max effort squats with the belt squat, and I did a 5-second tempo on the way down, working up to a 3-rep max. What I love about the belt squat is that you can do some eccentric loading. So I loaded up, the weight was heavy for me, and I did a 5-second tempo on the way down. So I'm really feeling that load and increasing that time under tension as I hit the bottom. Then when I hit the bottom, I try to stand up as explosively and as powerfully as I can. Because the weight is heavy, I'm not moving fast, but I want that intent. I want that intention to be explosive. And what I love about the belt squat is that you have the safety handles there, so that if you get pinned at the bottom, it's real easy to kind of like pull yourself back up. And so what I often do, especially with eccentric phases of training, is I do load pretty much up to my max, or up to, what would be like the most I can give for that day. I lower myself down with control without, putting my hands on the safeties, or without putting a bunch of weight or support on the safeties. Then when I hit the bottom, if I need to give myself a little bit of a boost to get past that sticking point, I will. But that way I'm really making sure that at least on the way down, like I am fighting, I'm getting a lot of quality work, a lot of quality time under tension, focusing on that eccentric phase of the movement. So I did that belt squat, working up to a 3-rep max. Then I followed it up with some tempo Bulgarian split squats. And then I did, what else did I do? Oh, I did like glute ham raises, and I did the adductor machine. I've been really into rock climbing lately. So at the gym I train at, they have some rock climbing holds near the pull-up bars. So like you can't climb on it, but you can like grab them and do pull-ups on them, or dead hangs. So I did some of those. That was day 1. Then day 2, it looked very similar. It was a max effort upper body. So I did tempo bench press, tempo incline dumbbell bench, did some heavy dumbbell pullovers, and then kind of closed it out with some seal rows and some dips. I didn't run this week, and so the way I'm doing my conditioning is I'm actually doing fan bike intervals at some point throughout the week. So I was supposed to do them on day 1. I didn't get them done. I ran out of time, and I've been dreading it. But I think after I record this podcast, I got to run to the gym and do some fan bike sprint intervals, which is going to suck, but we got to get it done. So that was day 2, max effort upper. And then day 3 was a full body dynamic effort workout. So did something really fast and explosive for the lower body, did something really fast and explosive for the upper body, mixed in some different kinds of jumps or plyometrics for the lower body, did something similar for the upper body. And then I did day 3 yesterday. And so I also just wanted to make sure I walked out of the gym with an awesome pump. So I also did some timed sets. I'm a big fan of timed sets because I think timed sets are fantastic for grapplers. I think I talked about time sets in the repetition effort YouTube video that I did about a month ago, or maybe a month and a half ago. But a timed set basically is a set of any exercise, but you don't have any reps. You just go for time. And it's not like an AMRAP where, okay, you want to get as many reps as you can in 60 seconds. It's not about getting as many reps just to like check off reps. It's about getting the best quality set doing the most quality work that you can do within that time frame. So for me, yesterday I did 3 exercises. The way I structured it was a tri-set. So you run from one exercise into the next, and once you finish one set of all 3 exercises, then you can take a rest. Each set was 60 seconds, and the exercises were dumbbell hammer curls, dumbbell chest flies, and prone shoulder angels, or which is like, imagine you're doing a dumbbell lat raise, but you're laying face down flat on a bench. So you're not really getting that medial delt or that outside of the delt. It's hitting a lot more of your rear delts, a lot more of your upper back, your traps, probably a little bit of your rhomboids in there as well. And so You grab the dumbbells and it's 60 seconds. So you start a timer for 60 seconds and you just start cranking out hammer curls. And again, the goal isn't just to like rush through and try to get as many reps as possible. You're trying to get the best quality work over the course of that 60 seconds. So for me, I tried to maintain like a good tempo of like, okay, 2 seconds up, 2 seconds down. Try to hold that as much as possible through the entire 60 seconds. I'm not even really worrying about reps. I just want to like make sure that by the end of those 60 seconds, I got a crazy burn and a crazy pump. Same thing with the dumbbell chest flies. I'm not like cranking out chest flies and going super fast like a CrossFit workout. I'm just trying to get the greatest quality work done within that interval. And what's great about that is that it's really tough. It's really, really hard. And you get a crazy burn, you get a crazy pump. And I believe that it's a great way to prepare you for some of that localized fatigue that you get when you're doing hard grappling training. The thing that's that every grappler experiences at some point is like you get to someone's back, you're scrambling, you're trying to, put in that choking hand, but you're hand fighting and your opponent's defending, and your forearms and your arms get so blown up and they get so pumped up and the fatigue is crazy. And sometimes you even get to like get the submission in. It's not like perfectly set in where you're going to get the finish, but you're like 99% of the way there. And your opponent's defending just enough to where your arms can't squeeze anymore and you end up just gassing out. And that is the worst. It's the worst thing ever when that happens. And I have found that timed sets can be a great addition to a grappler's training program to help them be better prepared for those sensations of localized fatigue where they get like the craziest burn in their arms, the crazy burn in their forearms or their hamstrings and stuff like that. So I'm a big fan of time sets. That's what I did as part of my workout yesterday. I got one more training session to do this week as far as stuff in the gym goes, and that is those conditioning intervals, which I'm not looking forward to, but the work has got to get done at some point. Hey, real quick, I wanted to pause the podcast and tell you about the Strength Matrix training app and our free training program called Grappler Accelerator. This is a complete training program that covers all of your needs to help you get started on becoming the best grappling athlete that you can be. Everything from a full strength and conditioning training program, a simple and clean diet guide, recovery protocols, a super sleep toolkit, and a bunch of other dope stuff to help you lift heavy and roll hard. There's already over 1,000 grapplers that have downloaded this training program and gotten started on enhancing their grappling athleticism, and you can be the next. To download this training program today, just go to thestrengthmatrix.com/grappler or click the link in the description below. Now, back to the podcast. That's the basic outline of what I've been doing in the gym over the last 6 months and kind of, this new phase of training that I recently started. It's really just 3 days a week right now. Max effort lower on day 1, max effort upper on day 2, and then day 3 is a full body dynamic effort training session. And what that means for Jiu Jitsu is that I actually have a little bit more room to start being on the mat more often. And so I've made this mistake before where I have had seasons of life or seasons of training where I haven't been doing as much jiu-jitsu, or my jiu-jitsu training volume and frequency was a lot lower. And then I just kind of get like fed up with it. It's like, that's it. Starting next week, I'm going to go to jiu-jitsu Monday through Saturday, every day porrada, roll hard, all that stuff. And usually when I do that, within a couple of weeks, I end up crashing out because it's a lot of training volume kind of getting dumped on me way too fast. And I just haven't built up the capacity to handle that and still be able to recover well. Because remember, I say it on every single freaking podcast, it's not about what you do, it's about what you do and can still recover from. It's not just about training hard, it's about training hard and recovering harder. So to kind of avoid crashing out like that, one thing I'm working on now is starting my jiu-jitsu training volume a little bit lower and gradually every couple weeks adding more volume, adding more training sessions. So what that looks like this week is I did 1 gi session and I did 2 no gi sessions. The gi session that I'm doing is just like a typical class at the place I'm training at right now. So it's 10-minute warm up, 35 minutes of technique, and then about 45 minutes of live rolling. And that works for me. It's a gi class. I really don't like training in the gi, but I know it'd be good for me to continue to kind of build those skills of grappling in the gi. And then the other 2 training sessions are kind of unique. I am doing 2 training sessions a week that are 100% constraints-led approach games, or CLA, or you may have heard some people talk about ecological training, ecological dynamics, all that stuff. So those are the no-gi sessions. And so on day 1, I did some constraint-based games. Pretty much all the games are based around guard passing. And then towards the end, my training partner and I, Zach, we ended up doing a couple games starting in mount, or like different types of chest-to-chest and chest-to-back connection, and then working on submissions from there. And then on day 2, it was a lot of wrestling-focused games and then more guard passing games. And so that's basically my jiu-jitsu training for the next couple weeks. It's going to be 3 sessions at a minimum. Maybe I'll throw in a 4th session in there, like going to a, having 1 traditional gi class, 2 no-gi CLA type sessions, and then maybe going to 1 no-gi class, or, I'll figure it out when we get there. But I'm starting out with not as much mat time on the mat now, and I'm going to build up that work capacity, build up my conditioning, build up my recovery ability, and then gradually add in more training sessions as I can start to handle them more often. So I'm not exactly sure how long this maintenance phase is going to be. Like, I'm not trying to bulk more. I'm done bulking, but I'm also not trying to diet down and lean out at all. So I'm just trying to maintain the current size and strength that I'm at. And I want to maintain that while I'm bringing up all the other areas of my athleticism. So I'm kind of focusing a little bit more on my conditioning. I'm focusing a little bit more on my explosiveness, on my power output, focusing a little bit more on jiu-jitsu. And so kind of as all those things increase, ultimately, I want to work up to being able to pretty easily, maybe not easily, it's not easy, but I'd say realistically, I want to work up to realistically being able to handle 5 to 6 jiu-jitsu sessions per week and still feel like I'm able to recover just fine. That will be ideal. So that's pretty much it for my training. That's what I'm doing right now. I'll keep you guys updated over the next several podcasts with how this new approach of training is feeling and some of the gains that I'm seeing. And then just like everything else, like I just finished that 6-month hypertrophy and strength period. So those training programs, all the things I tested, things that worked, are going to be built in to some of the new training programs that come out on the Strength Matrix training app. I really want the Strength Matrix training app to be the ultimate source, not just of training, but really education on how to take back control of your own training, so that way you can feel and perform your best. That way you can lift heavy and roll hard, and that way you can develop elite grappling athleticism. Ad goes in right here. So I didn't just want to talk about my own stuff. I also wanted to talk about some stuff that other people from the Lift Heavy Roll Hard Grappling Club have brought up. I made a post on Instagram about just different topics and things you guys wanted to hear on the podcast, and some of you guys had some great ideas. And what I think is so cool is that you guys are super smart. You guys are really invested in learning about this stuff, and the questions and the topics that you guys are interested in getting more information on are super exciting. It gets me fired up. I no disrespect to white belts, like we've all been there, but sometimes it's like, okay, how many times do we have to answer the question of like, how do I not get arm barred? It's just like, well, don't let them get control of your arm. And I think in strength and conditioning, sometimes people ask those kinds of questions, and I'll still always be available to answer those. But I don't want to say that they're bad questions, but I think that you can always understand and see someone's intelligence not by what they know, but by what kind of questions they ask. And the questions that you guys are asking, the questions that I see in the comment section on my Instagram, the comment section of the YouTube channel, and on Spotify, those are fantastic questions, which is a sign to me that you guys are learning, that you guys are like building upon your knowledge base on how to apply these training principles, apply these training methods, and you guys are just absolutely crushing it right now, and I'm super proud of you. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into some of these topics that people submitted, no pun intended, for the podcast. This is from Chivalrous or Shival Diva. I don't know if I'm saying that right. My bad, dog. He says one topic he'd like to learn more about is balancing skill development and hard/pro training sessions along with lifting and cardio throughout the week. So I have a lot of videos on this within the Strength Matrix training app, like how to balance lifting heavy and rolling hard. And so if you haven't checked those out yet, definitely check those out. They're in the education portal inside the app. But I will kind of briefly say, like, it's important to kind of take a few steps back and see what your main goals are or what your main vision is. You guys might have heard me talk about the VIP method before. The VIP method, what that is it's just a way for you to look at training, and you can really just apply it to any area of life. But it's great for looking at training to give you a little bit more direction and have a little bit more success with fulfilling your goals and the vision that you ultimately have. So vision is the first part, because having a goal is not good enough. If you sign up for a jiu-jitsu competition or a wrestling tournament or any sort of competition, let's stick with a jiu-jitsu competition. You sign up for an 80cc open or a Grappling Industries, and you say to everyone, like, yeah, my goal is to win. It's like, okay, whoop-de-doo. That's not special because literally everyone else in your bracket has the exact same goal. So what are you going to do differently to actually make that happen? And that's where having a vision kind of takes that goal to the next level. You kind of want to progress the goal of, okay, I want to stand on top of that podium with a gold medal. I want to smash my bracket. I want to dominate, but I need a vision to get there. So how do I fill in the gaps between where I'm at now and where I want to be and build the vision that kind of fills in the middle? You don't need to have all the answers right now, and you probably will never have all the answers because that's just life. But the more clear you can get on your vision to get to where you want to be successful, to win that jiu-jitsu competition, to nail that job interview, to whatever your vision is, the more you can fill that in. I don't want to say the easier it's going to be because it's still going to be a struggle, but you'll spend less time kind of spinning around guessing on what to do. So if you look at that example, okay, I want to compete at the 80cc Open or I want to compete at Grappling Industries, it's in 12 weeks. Well, part of that vision to go from where I'm at now to being ready to perform my best means I got to get in good shape. Okay, I'm going to follow a strength and conditioning training program. That's part of my vision. I also need to work on different aspects of my game so that way I go in with the highest level of skill to be prepared for that competition. However, it's not just about skills. It's not just about athleticism. It's also about tactics. So how do I prepare for the rule set? How do I prepare to, leverage my skills and my athleticism within the rule set to have a really good game plan and good tactics going into that competition? Basically, what I'm trying to say is that when we have this question of, okay, how do we balance skill development with our hard sparring or say pro training sessions or competition training sessions, and then also trying to balance that with the work that we do in the gym, we got to have a clear vision. Then we can start to parse out, okay, where do each of these things go? If you're prepping for a jiu-jitsu competition, there's going to be a lot more hard sparring rounds compared to easy sparring rounds, right? Because you're prepping for a competition. That means that you're going to be putting a lot greater physical demand on your body, which means that because your jiu-jitsu training is going to have a much greater physical toll and physical demand, that might mean that you're not going to be spending as much time in the gym. And we need to be a little bit more careful and a little bit more efficient with what we're doing in the gym so we can still get the benefits from going to the gym, but not have it be at the cost of how we perform on the mat. And there's a lot of different things that you can do with like how you structure training programs throughout the week, having certain days of the week that are reserved for high stimulus training sessions only, other days of the week that you reserve for low stimulus training sessions. Again, this is all something that I talk about in the education portal on the Strength Matrix training app. And I've also talked about it and a lot of other places too. I think I have some videos on YouTube on how to prepare for your first jiu-jitsu competition and stuff like that. So a lot of the information is out there. I suggest looking at those videos. But it really starts with, okay, you got to be really clear about what your vision is, and that will kind of help kind of direct how you organize your training throughout the week and how you find a good balance of, okay, how much strength training do I need versus how much time do I need on the mat. Next topic from This is a funny handle. His name is @chosen_Juan, like JUAN _479. His topic is, what about a workout plan for using a Bulgarian bag, Dopamino bands, and dumbbells? So I've seen the Bulgarian bags. I've played around with them. Like, I haven't done a full workout with them, and I think they're pretty cool. I think there's like a lot of great dynamic effort movements that you can use with a Bulgarian bag. You can pick it up and slam it. You can do different types of like ground to overhead or hip to overhead movements with that are a little bit, I don't want to say safer, but just less technically difficult and provide less wear and tear on the body than compared to like a more traditional Olympic lift. You can do different types of slams. You can do different types of throws. I think they're a really cool piece of training equipment. I personally don't have a whole lot of experience working with one. I just don't have access to one, but I think they're pretty dope. The thing with Dopamino bands and other bands that are like that, I've used them. I had a pair for a while, and I'll be honest, I just don't get it. I don't understand what they're used for. I don't see much benefit in using them, at least the way that they are, the way that they're marketed, like doing a lot of the exercises that you see people doing where they're treating them like battle ropes, or they're like tying them to their ankles and doing sprawls and stuff like that with them. I don't see much value in that. I think if you want to get better and strengthen your sprawls, you should probably just like practice sprawling against a live person trying to take you down, and then build general strength and explosiveness in other areas in the gym. I think the battle rope thing, I just have never found like any good training stimulus from that for me personally. Like, I would much rather just use real weighted battle ropes that are actually a little bit more physically taxing. I think you could probably like rig up some stuff, like put a band, kind of loop it around one shoulder and then around your hip, and get like some banded resistance on some trunk rotation. I've seen a lot of baseball players do that before. So you probably could get some benefit from using that. But like a lot of the ways that I see these wrestlers and jiu-jitsu athletes using those types of bands, I just don't see the value in it. And maybe someone's an expert out there that can, help me better understand the benefit that they provide. But I think I'll just be honest. Like, I've said it like 6 times already. I just don't see much value in them, at least in the way that their marketing is telling people how to use them. I can probably find a way to use them to get more benefit out of it, like jerry rigging it to something, but in how it's marketed, I just don't get how that would really provide a whole lot of additional benefit to a grappling athlete. And of course, dumbbells are fantastic. I don't even really need to talk more about that. Dumbbells can be a great training tool. And there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do with dumbbells. And even though I was kind of dogging on the Dopamino bands for a minute, all of these things are training tools. And that's not to say that any of these training tools are good or bad. There are certain training tools that are more and less appropriate based on your training needs. So I don't use the Bosu ball that often, if ever, but it's not a bad tool to use. It just has like it's very appropriate in some scenarios, not appropriate in other scenarios. And I'd say Dopamino bands are the same way. Next thing from @I_am_a_libertarian. You guys got to chill out with all the underscores, man. I don't know if you guys are putting in all those underscores because someone else took that handle, but the underscores, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of using underscores, but that's just me. And I'm a libertarian. You use whatever you want for your handle. He wanted to learn more about periodization for lifting in jiu-jitsu. Such a huge topic. That really deserves its own episode. Maybe one of these episodes, what I'll do is I'll like basically break down all of my training journals and my training spreadsheets from the last several years and talk about the periodization strategies that I used for those different phases of my competitive grappling season when I was still competing, and also just like the different stages of life. All periodization means is it's a progressive plan to reach a certain goal. That's really how I look at it. There are some forms of periodization that work really well for beginners, And then as an athlete becomes more advanced, they don't work as well. There are certain forms of periodization that are super, super, super advanced that beginners probably don't need to mess with because it's just too complicated, but it's great for advanced athletes, and a whole bunch of stuff in between. And so some of the more classic forms of periodization are, you have like linear periodization, which basically means like at the very beginning of a training program, you do a lot of reps with a very light weight, and then each week you increase the weight and decrease the reps all the way until you get to the end where you go for a 1 rep max. You have a block periodization where you kind of have like certain blocks of training that are dedicated to a certain goal or a certain type of adaptation that you're looking for. So there may be a hypertrophy block, there may be a strength block, there may be a conditioning block, or I even heard Christian Guzman talk about how he does blocks of like structural, what did he call it? Like structural resilience or structural conditioning, basically like getting your body healthy enough to lift heavier weights. And so that's block training. You kind of have a block of training where you focus kind of on one thing at a time. And the issues with linear periodization and with block training is that if you're doing true linear periodization and true block training, the gains that you make early on in the training program often go away, or you don't get the full benefit of those gains by the time you make it to the very end. So all the volume work that you were doing in the hypertrophy block, all the volume that you were doing in your at the beginning of your linear periodization where you were doing lots of reps with light weight, the work capacity, the hypertrophy that you develop in that section of training often tends to diminish by the time you get into your peaking phase, or your peaking block, or at the very end of your linear training program. And that is where, at least for me, I think like those things can be great for beginners, because beginners, like, it's good to have like something very clearly laid out and very simple to follow and see the progression from thing to thing. But once someone goes from beginner to intermediate, that's where I think it's a good idea to start changing how you're periodizing these things. And then another form of periodization is called DUP, or daily undulating periodization. All that means is that like each day of training throughout the week kind of varies up and down in how intense the workout is or how much volume the workout has. So one workout in the week may be high volume but low intensity. The next workout may be high intensity, low volume. The workout after that may be moderate intensity, moderate volume. So it kind of moves up and down like a wave throughout the week. And I think daily undulating periodization can work great because it does take into account kind of sparsing out different ends of that spectrum so you can have better recovery between training sessions, which then would, in theory, lead to greater outcomes. And then the other kind of periodization that you have is conjugate periodization, which it kind of gets muddled because you do have like the conjugate system, which is like these 3 different methods of training. And then you have conjugate periodization, which is like taking those 3 different methods of training and organizing it over the course of several months in a very specific way. And so the way I look at it is like, okay, you got linear, which on one end starts with high reps, low weight, ends at very, very low reps, very, very high weight. Block training is blocks of training that focus on one specific thing. Daily undulating periodization is varying the volume and intensity across the week for any kind of goal. It could be hypertrophy, strength, conditioning, whatever. It's not specific to the goal. It's specific to how it's being formatted throughout the week. And then conjugate is kind of like daily undulating periodization, where it is specific to the format. It's not necessarily specific to the goal. So you can still, like, conjugate, you have the max effort method where you're lifting very, very heavy weights very intensely, working up to some form of a max, usually 1 to 5 reps. You have the dynamic effort method where you're lifting sub-maximal loads at maximum speed. Then you have repetition effort method, which is where you're lifting sub-maximal loads for lots of sets and reps to either work on general physical preparedness, hypertrophy, developing or bringing up weak points, stuff like that. So if you want to learn about periodization and all these different things, in one of the episodes I did early on in the podcast, I talked about the best training program for Jiu Jitsu. And then I've also have videos on my YouTube channel talking all about the conjugate system. So watch those videos. That'll give you a good idea of the different forms of periodization and kind of how to build a training program around that. And I am definitely going to do more training or more podcasts and videos on this topic because it gets really, really deep. At least in my opinion, it feels like it's really, really deep. So but it's a good thing that you guys are interested in learning about that because I think that's where most grapplers make mistakes. I think they're really short-sighted. They look at like, oh, I'm only going to look at what the best exercises are, but they don't look at the periodization and the programming of how those exercises get plugged into a training program that's going to lead to the best results possible. I think any training program, good or bad, can be effective for something if you just train really, really hard and are really intense with it. However, that's like saying, yeah, any white belt or any blue belt can like do some damage to another grappler if they just roll really, really hard. It's like, okay, well, that's true, but ideally we'd want to like see a much greater improvement in progress and skill. We'd want to see much greater improvement in progress in technical ability and all this stuff. So even though like it can be effective, let's go for what's most effective. Let's go for what's not just optimal, but like I think the people that are often talking about optimal, I feel like sometimes sacrifice intensity for optimization, or people that say like train smarter, not harder. It's like, well, I don't know about that. Like you should definitely train hard. And if you're trying to train smart as a way to like avoid hard work, like you're not going to get very far. So train hard, be intelligent about it. And I'm kind of losing my point here. So I'll just move on to the next thing. Nick_S_Downs. How to decide breaks between lifting and jiu-jitsu, 1 week recovery and fat loss. So this kind of further goes into that periodization question. If you are programming and periodizing your training well and you have good recovery habits, you really should hardly ever be taking breaks from lifting and jiu-jitsu. So for me, I kind of only take a week off from training about once every 3 to 6 months. Other than that, like I'm training all the time. That doesn't mean I'm training super, super high intensity every single day I'm at jiu-jitsu or every single day I'm in the gym. It just means that like I'm managing my volume, which is like total sets and reps or total training rounds or total minutes spent on the mat, and my intensity, which for lack of a better term is how close you're getting to failure on any of these things. I manage that well throughout the week, and I also take care of my recovery. So that way I don't have to take a complete week off of training every 4th week or every 5th week. It's like, look, I'm just dialing down the intensity, dialing down the volume when I feel a little bit banged up. So that way I have a little bit more room to recover, and then I can just ramp it back up when I feel good again. So for me personally, the way I look at it is if your training program is structured well, you really don't need deloads. You really don't need weeks off of training. I think, it's good to plug those in throughout the year, but they should happen very sporadically. So the best time to take a week off of training would be after you compete. That'd be a great time to take a week off. If you finish a 6-month bulk, that would be a great time to take a week off from lifting, which is what I did. So I did those 6 months of training, 3 months of hypertrophy, 3 months of strength, and then for a week, I did nothing related to jiu-jitsu or the gym. I went rock climbing almost every day. It was super fun, and I watched a ton of movies, and I slept a lot. That was like my break. And then after that break was over, I'd go right back to what I was doing before, lifting heavy and rolling hard. All right, we got a couple more here before we're going to call it a day. Thoughts? This is from @KSoto19. Thoughts on strongman or odd object training and its carryover to grappling. Dude, I think strongman stuff is freaking dope, and I'm trying to get a little bit more into it. Picking up heavy stones, picking up heavy sandbags, carrying all that crazy stuff, I think builds a great kind of strength, like a non-traditional strength that has great transfer and carryover to some of the non-traditional movements that you find yourself in on the mat. There's a great podcast that's going to drop on Mark Bell's Power Project with Daniel Strauss, who's the Raspberry Ape. In that podcast, he talks a lot about how stone lifting, sandbag lifting, and then different types of like these interesting grip exercises have a great transfer and carryover to what you do on the mat at Jiu Jitsu. So definitely check that out. At petty.ab, imposter syndrome among Jiu Jitsu athletes. Bro, that's a huge topic. That's a big one. And imposter syndrome is 100% real. I still feel like an imposter sometimes, and I've been training for over a decade. But it's that internal voice in your head that's constantly telling you you're not good enough, or like you're so far away from the people who are ahead of you. And sometimes you gotta, at least in my opinion, one of the best ways to overcome imposter syndrome is to put up points on that scoreboard. That's what my good friend and mentor Mark Bell is always talking about, putting up points on the scoreboard. You got to get some wins under your belt to start building that confidence. If you feel like an imposter at jiu-jitsu, like start stacking some wins. Doesn't mean you got to go like make the new goal of winning ADCC or CJI or anything like that, but find little things that you can win and start stacking those wins. Maybe that's a small win that you make and making it to all the jiu-jitsu training sessions that you set out to do at the start of the week. Maybe that's sticking to your diet consistently for 30 days. Maybe that is never missing a gym session. Whatever those wins are, start stacking those wins under your belt, and you can build confidence off of the things that you've done. And if you're not building confidence on the things that you've done, that's where you start leaning into delusion. The difference between confidence and delusion is people who are confident put their belief in the things that they've already achieved and that they've already done. Delusional people put their belief in things that they think they can do, but they haven't actually done. And I think imposter syndrome is kind of in that same realm where we feel like we are inadequate, or we feel like an imposter because we see all the things that other people are doing, and we see the gap between where we are and where they are at. And we're like, man, I don't feel like I felt this as a blue belt, I felt this as a purple belt, and I still feel this as a brown belt sometimes. Like, man, I suck at jiu-jitsu. I don't even know why I have a brown belt right now. But if we just take a step back and look at, okay, well, how did I get to this point? Oh, well, I have been training for a while. I am decently good at jiu-jitsu. I know more about jiu-jitsu than most people on the planet. So yeah, that makes sense. I'm not an imposter. I'm not the best grappler in the entire world. That's no secret. But I do have a track record, and I do have proof of things that I've achieved and things that I've done in all of these training sessions that show that, yeah, I made it to this point in jiu-jitsu based on all of the hard work I've done leading up to this point. I'm not the best in the world, and I'm not claiming to be, but I've put in the work to get to this point here, and I can be confident in that. So hope that was helpful, my man. All right, we're going to go ahead and call it a day. That is it for this episode of the Settlage Strength Podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and hanging out. Like I said, doing this podcast is my favorite thing in the entire world. I freaking love hanging out with you guys. I love to see that the Lift Heavy Roll Hard Grappling Club is expanding and growing. The best way to support this podcast, my man, is if you share this with your favorite training partners. That could be your favorite lifting partner. That can be your favorite grappling partner. Send them this episode, put them on game, invite them to start lifting heavy and rolling hard with you. Let's all get brutally strong. Let's all pack on slabs of muscle, and let's all build our conditioning to the point where we never gas out. Lift heavy, roll hard. Catch y'all later. Peace.